And we're live. Good day, whiskey brothers and sisters, and welcome to the Whisky Book Club's fourth book review, American Spirit by David Jennings. As always, we are honored to have you, the viewer, and our panel with us today. That's it right there. My name's Dolph. I'm the president of the Alberta Scotch Society, founder of the Whisky Book Club, and your host tonight. For those of you that are new to us, I'll tell you a itty bitty bit what we're about. We are a group of whiskey geeks that love to share a dram, share our passion for reading, and it's mostly about whiskey or whiskey-related activities. The choice of our fourth book is completely different from our previous three. The common thread, though, is our love for whiskey and our desire to try something new. We're adventurous people. That's the difference, or what's the difference, is we're focusing now on American whiskey and specifically on bourbon and American rye whiskey. Now, this might not be new to all of us, but delving specifically into a very specific brand is. Now, I don't believe that there's anyone right now that I'd rather have guide us in our exploration of a single iconic brand than David Jennings here with us, and he's the author of American Spirit. And that one right there again, let's show it as much as we can. All of us have it online because we're waiting for the paper copy, which is stuck in Miami. Doesn't matter. We've all got our copies. We're good. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to learn more about bourbon as a whole, and I think that I'll get a really solid base by delving into this one specific brand that has one specific mash bill from one specific state and a region within the state. This will be the American whiskey and the bourbon that I will keep as my main reference point when I compare all new American ryes and other American bourbons, and I think David's just the type of guy to help us out with that. So let's start us all out with our roundtable introductions with our names, other platform handles, and we're going to start with our special guest, David, and continue alphabetically through our members. So we're going to go Dave, John, Kent, Cheryl. Sounds good? You're up, kind sir.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on. That was some very kind stuff of you to say there. But I appreciate the opportunity. My name is David Jennings, of course, and I wrote the book American Spirit, which is about wild turkey. I'm a wild turkey super fan. Some of you might be familiar with my blog, rarebird101.com. It's a lot of whiskey reviews, essentially wild turkey reviews, but there's some other information on there as well. You can find me on Instagram at rarebird101, Twitter at ourbird101, and you can also find me on a few other places like LinkedIn and Patreon. So, but thank you again for having me on, and I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Dave, you're up.
Oh, hey, it's old Dave coming from his basement here. You can get me at UconDave_EDM.
And
short and sweet.
Sir. Short and sweet. And yeah. John, welcome to you, sir.
Thank you. I'm John, looking forward to getting the book. Unfortunately, I drank my samples already, so I'll be drinking Jefferson's Voyage 17.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much. And let's go Cheryl Kent.
Hi, my name's Cheryl. You can find me on all other social media as Cheryl's_1. Glad to be here tonight.
This is Cheryl's first time on tonight, just like John. So we're a very special welcome to those two.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kent. I go by Whiskey Ass on all platforms, and we're looking forward to this book.
And we're all looking forward to that. And we might have two more people pop in a couple minutes or so. And we're waiting for our American friend down south. And he gets his times mixed up because we have to work with 3 different time zones. And sometimes we're off. And I'm just going to blame him anyways. It's his fault and not mine. All right. So, David, thank you for agreeing to help us out on our journey. We, as in the Alberta Scotch Society, and we're affectionately known as ASS. We're not trying to be crude. It's just us. We've hosted you for a tasting already, and we're keenly aware of your knowledge of this specific brand and their history. And it's our hope that you can get as much out of the time we have together as I'm sure all of us will. But let's start off with a question directly for you, kind sir. Okay. And David, I don't know. Let's get started with something we all share. A point in time when we decided that we liked whiskey. Now, not as a mix to help us feel good, liberated, free, but because we like the taste. Now, you make reference to it in the book about your first whiskey, and I think it's with your brother or brother-in-law. I can't remember.
Brother-in-law.
Brother-in-law, having it neat or on the rocks. But you didn't mention what the specific dram was. So
Okay.
I'm asking you now, do you remember the exact dram?
Well, it was Crown Royal.
Okay.
I believe it was the XR. It was in a blue box.
Yeah.
And it was on the rocks, and I really appreciated it. I was like, well, there's more to this than just mixing with Coke or ginger. So that's what got me started.
How did that taste in comparison to what you'd done before, though? Like, what opened your eyes when you tasted that first time? Was it just smoother or what?
Well, I think it was just, years of having whiskey as a mixer. And then this was the first time having it without that aid of a mixer, and not in like a shooter or something like that. So it was just, it was given to me that way, and I wasn't expecting it to be given to me that way, but I wasn't going to be like, well, no, thank you. So I tried it, and I was like, I actually kind of like this, and it's funny how your palate evolves, because, like I go back to when I first started drinking coffee, and that would have been when I was in high school, and it would have been loaded with sugar and loaded with half and half or creamer. Okay. And then, over time the sugar goes away, but I keep the creamer. And then now, it's coffee black only. Like I don't want anything in my coffee. I don't want sweet coffee. I don't mind like coffee ice cream or something every once in a while, but as far as sipping coffee, I would just want it black. It's kind of the same way, I think, if I go back and look at my, enjoyment of alcoholic beverages. It starts off, you're trying to conceal the ethanol. You're trying to, cover up the alcohol. You want something that tastes easy. So you're, peach schnapps or something, and then you kind of get into, you develop some, and you get into, appreciating beer, or like a bourbon and a Coke and stuff like that. So it happens. It just kind of evolves. And now it's where, I pretty much only appreciate whiskey neat. I do have it on the rocks every once in a while, especially if I'm outside.
Yeah.
And then I enjoy a cocktail every once in a while. But for the most, it's whiskey neat, but that didn't happen overnight,
Well, and several $1,000s later, too, I think. We've all been through that as well.
Yeah, that's there's a price to pay in this hobby.
Yeah. Let's go through the panel. Dave, do you remember your first whiskey you had that was neat or on the rock, where you liked just the flavor?
Well, oh, geez. Yeah, no, I thought you were going to go back to the old days when I was stealing Dad's Johnny Walker Red.
Well,
when we first started, when we bought our still, I went out and bought all those minis so I could kind of understand whiskey. And I called the boss and said, hey, I'm not going to be very good at selling whiskey because I don't like the taste of this. He said, no, go out and get some good scotches. And that's what changed. And I can't remember what I would have had first, but it was always neat. I know what Coke tastes like. I've learned what whiskey tastes like.
Excellent. How about you, John?
Well, for me, it was about 35 years ago. I went to a hall party, and they had a bottle of Valentine's there, and so I started drinking that. I was the only one drinking it, so by the end of the hall party, they just gave me the bottle. So I probably had about 2/3 of it, so I don't know how much I really enjoyed it, as much as I just drank it.
No, that's a good one. And free whiskey's kind of another way to get to it as well. Cheryl and Kent, do you have one? Nope. There you go.
Oh, he's muted.
There we go.
Kent had us muted. So yeah, I definitely dabbled as a teenager, had the odd thing, and then just kind of strayed away from it. And then about 10 years ago again, I totally got back in. It was my brother-in-law initially that poured me a scotch, and I'm thinking, oh, I don't know that I'm going to like this. And there's no looking back. I've been going full speed ahead ever since.
You remember which one it was?
Oh gosh, in him it was a Lefroy.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Kent?
Yeah, for me, back it was at high school, late high school, I started doing a job as hotel restaurant promotions, and the manager had a bottle of Auchentoshan. And back then it was a round, tall, skinny bottle, right? Not the the oblong that everybody's used to seeing now. And I remember how much I enjoyed it, and maybe enjoyed it a little bit too much, but I haven't looked back. There was a number of years that I went away from Scotch, through the 30s, no budget for it kind of thing. But as you can see behind me, we have a little bit of a budget for whiskeys now.
Yeah. Well, or a credit card melting in the background.
Yeah.
And I'm the same thing. Went to it. So when my son was born, so 26 years ago now, or just before he was born, I had a taster pack from, there was Dalwhinnie in it, and Oban, and I think Laphroaig as well. So it was all the same company. And the one I kind of picked that I wanted a big bottle for Christmas. So Laura got me this. It was a Christmas present with the taster. And I zoned in on the Oban. I'm not sure why. So Oban 14. And then we were poor for the 3 kids, so I didn't have very much Scotch until we went to Europe, and then I could get duty free on the American base or on the NATO base, one of the two. And then I started just buying them and loving them since then. So that was mine, Oban 14. So still like that too. And let's go on. And I've got a quote as well. I like my quotes. Here's the quote right there. So if it said whiskey on the bottle, I gave it a chance. I spent countless hours on blogs, purchased every magazine and book I could find, and just about everything within my budget except one brand, Wild Turkey. So that's on page 6 of the book. David, I don't want to continue to quote you, so I'll ask you to tell us when you finally tried Wild Turkey and something you're passionate enough to write a book about. So it changed your mind that one time trying Wild Turkey. So tell us about that experience a little bit.
Okay, so that would have been probably around 2014 or so, and I had reached the point in my whiskey adventure where I was into bourbon, and I knew that was kind of the area that I wanted to stay in. So I avoided Wild Turkey 101 because I remembered it from college, and it was always kind of joked about and laughed about. That was your shooter, or your it was like the Roughnecks whiskey, the bottom shelf kind of stuff. So I'd kind of avoided it for a while, but I finally was checking out, and I got a small size bottle, like a pint or whatever, and took it home. And my intention was to drink it and review it for Reddit. And whenever I sipped it, I realized that there was a lot more to it than I was expecting. It wasn't just good whiskey; it was really good whiskey, and it kind of blew my mind. So I talked it up online. And a good friend reached out to me, an internet friend reached out to me and said, if I'd asked me if I'd ever tried Dusty Turkey, which is a reference, of course, to vintage distilled Wild Turkey. And he sent me some samples, and that was what really sent me down the rabbit hole, because I was already interested in the brand and Wild Turkey as a bourbon somewhat. But once I had that first nose it was an 81 Wild Turkey 101. So 1981 Wild Turkey 101. Once I first nosed that, I realized there was a lot more to this brand than I had ever imagined. And it just sent me down a rabbit hole.
All right. And how about the rest of you guys? And David, that's fantastic. And you stuck with it and went even deeper and deeper and deeper, which is it's great. So, but I'm wondering what type of personality you are. Are you like me? You just like fixate on something and then I got to know everything about it. I think that's
yes. If I find something that I really like, there's been only a few things like that. Like, I was very interested in music production for a long period of time and invested quite a bit into it, writing a play. So that kind of went hand in hand. I got involved in numismatics, which is coin collecting, for a while, and really nerded out over that for a while. But that gets expensive. If you think whiskey gets expensive, you can, if you really get serious with coin collecting, it can be significant.
See, and it always get worse, Cheryl.
But once I got into whiskey, it was like, to me, I think that, and I mentioned this on Single Cask Nation or One Nation Under Whiskey with Joshua and Jason, that I could relate whiskey to music in some ways, or at least the appreciation of it. There's a lot of similarities there, as strange as that may sound. And it's a hobby that you can enjoy alone, and with others. It's not something that you have to, like, some sports you have to have someone else to play with. Yeah. But with whiskey as a hobby, there's a lot, and I'm not just talking about sipping it. I'm talking, there's a lot you can read and research and get involved in. It's a good little quiet hobby to have. So I guess to answer your question is, I do get fixated on things.
I'm the same way, but we pick good rabbit holes though. So if we go down, they're fantastic rabbit hole. Yep. The rest of the panel, is there something you stayed away from for a while and then came back to it and just loved it, just out of happenstance, just by chance? I'll open it up to anyone who wants to talk.
Well, I'll go first. Every time I do a charity bartending, I always do they'd have the Jack Daniels and the Jim Beam, and I couldn't drink it. And eventually I got some Maker's Mark in San Francisco, and I said, hey, I kind of like this. And from there, I've been really interested in trying bourbons and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
And just for information for people out there, Yukon Dave, he's a beer guy. He loves his beer. He makes, well, I don't know if you're making beer anymore. You've got the beer making stuff back there. And
I'm too lazy.
Beer, so that was good. But he's mainly a beer guy that's been slowly getting more and more and more into whiskey. So it's good.
Well, it's just beer that's concentrated now, so I can understand that.
The big brothers. That's it.
Yeah.
John, Cheryl, Ken?
I got to say bourbon as well. It's, I mean, as a youth, we've all had the bottom shelf bourbons, and it was rather harsh, right? So you tend to stay away from it. And until we started book club, we got into some bourbons. I had one on the shelf. Now I have several dozen, like everything else here. Book club's been very expensive.
I thought you were going to say Canadian whiskey is what I thought you were going to say. Well, I would put money on it.
We're doing bourbon, American bourbon. So I was trying to stay away from that. But.
Okay. No, that's good. Staying with the theme. John. Oh, sorry, Cheryl. You have one?
No, really, other than the Canadian whiskeys, like you mentioned, up until book club, we truly just avoided that aisle. We didn't go anywhere near it. And then being exposed to it and trying different ones and realizing what they had to give. Yeah, we're definitely lovers of it now.
Yeah, we definitely spend as much time in the Canadian whiskey aisle.
Start there first. Yeah. And then if there's money left over, we'll stray.
Oh, okay, good one. And I'm really happy that we did as well. And David, our first one, Davin, and you know Davin fairly well. Actually, we're all emailing each other right before this. Davin's first book, So the History of Canadian Whiskey, that's what really put us onto our path for a lot of us. Because like them, I stayed away from Canadian whiskey. I was a Scotch snob, and finally kind of breaking away from that just the last 8 months, right? John, how about you? Is there something you came back to that you've been away from?
Well, I've always liked bourbon, but what I found out with bourbon just by doing our book clubs is that, and where I got more of an appreciation for it, is that I find that bourbon opens up my taste buds. And when I taste another whiskey, I can actually taste a few of the other flavors that you're supposed to taste that I don't necessarily taste when I first sip it.
Okay. I'm the same way, but with me, it's not bourbon, it's peat. And that's why you see me a lot double fisting and I'm with peat and something else, because I find that when I have the peat, it opens up the sweetness of other things. And Kent's always got his beer regardless. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. That's good. What I should tell you, though, what we're doing in the background is we have 3 ryes tonight. So we're comparing. The first one was Wild Turkey Rye. It's not the 101, just Wild Turkey Rye. The 40.5%. So 91 proof. 81 proof. The Russell's 6-year-old, and this is not the single cask. It's 6, and our Canadian that we're comparing it to is the Stock and Barrel. And Stock and Barrel is from Waters. What's it called? Stillwater. We know it by Stock and Barrel a bit better. So we're doing 3 ryes this week, and we're tasting these. Those people haven't been with us.
Some of us are doing 3. Others are doing a few more.
Well, I'm doing these. I'm sticking to the plan. And the plan is we'll try to decide which one of these 3 I like best, if there is one. Next week is a bit more interesting for me because we've got the Cornerstone, Masters Keep Cornerstone, which I've pitted against Lot 40 cast strength and the other Canadian or the whiskey of the year, if you're going to, or if we're going to believe that person who we don't want to talk about too much. So I don't want to open it up, but the Alberta Premium Cask Strength. So we're going to have those three next week to try to come up with a favorite. So it's going to be really neat because it's my first time with the Master's Keep. I haven't had one of them yet, any of them. So I'm looking forward to it. All right, David, another quote. Let's look right here. I'll put that up. So I want people to still buy your book after watching this, and I'd like to present another quote to have you elaborate on it. I'm trying not to have too much, so I actually print your whole book up here. I'm often asked what's so special about wild turkey. That's an excellent question and precisely why I started writing this book in the first place. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, I'd say that wild turkey embodies the essence of America. In fact, I would argue it's as distinctly American as bourbon itself. Bold, genuine, and true. So if you could elaborate on that a little bit, because I really like that quote. The next one I'll show you is my favorite quote, but I really like this one.
Okay.
So I'm throwing you up.
There's a lot to chew in that one. Well, to kind of simplify there at the end, bold, genuine, true is printed on a lot of the wild turkey bottlings. It's kind of their motto, more or less. And but it fits the brand so well because wild turkey's origins go back to basically the settling of America, and it all started with an immigrant family from Ireland. And I don't know how deep you want me to go into the history right now, because I'm sure you've got some questions later. But
we do. Yeah.
The Rippey family is basically the origin there of wild turkey, the distillery, not necessarily wild turkey, the brand. But these immigrants came over and started farming and made a simple little store in Anderson County, in an area they named Tyrone after their city and the township they came from in Ireland, and became pretty successful with that, enough so that James Rippey invested in a distillery after the Civil War and passed that on to his son, T.B. Rippey. And TB had a very nice whiskey dynasty there at the end of the 19th century. Yeah. TB's brother also distilled. And what you'll find is that this lineage and the Rippey family of distilling, went all the way up until the point where Jimmy Russell, who is still master distiller at Wild Turkey, was basically handed the reins there. So there's this long history at that location of distilling American whiskey, more specifically bourbon, and they've used the same recipe as far back as they can remember. There was the recipe that was passed on to Jimmy, and that was what Mr. Hughes and the Rippey family were using for their recipe. So Wild Turkey is very much an American brand. Plus, you've got the turkey as the symbol for the brand, and that turkey is very unique to America. Matter of fact, Ben Franklin wanted the national bird to be a wild turkey. Of course, it's the bald eagle, which is a little bit more majestic, but we can argue about that another time. Anyway, so there's a lot there. The story of Wild Turkey is like many other successful businesses, and it didn't happen overnight. This was something that involved a lot of ups and downs and perseverance and staying true to what is a quality product, when a lot of brands kind of went in various directions in a scramble trying to stay alive. Jimmy Russell just kept making whiskey the way he knew how to make it, and that's how he got through the rough times. But we can talk about that more as we get into the history, but that's when you get the whole big picture, when you get the whole story of Wild Turkey, you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about. It's very much an American brand.
All right. And I was going to ask you as well, did the Rippeys have the same mash bill, like all the way back, the 75% corn, the 13 rye, and 12 barley?
I'm pretty sure that the Rippey brothers did. Okay. Now, I don't know what T.B. Rippey used. I don't know what James P. Rippey used, which is T.B.'s brother. But the Rippey brothers were distilling there all the way up until they were purchased by the Gould brothers around 1950. Jimmy Russell started in 1954. but Ernie Rippey and Bill Hughes were both master distillers there at the distillery, and they passed on the recipe that they were using to Jimmy. So we know they were using what Rippey Brothers was using, but there was Rippey Brothers post-prohibition and pre-prohibition. So I can't say for sure. But I don't know why they would change it. I would like to think that they probably stuck with what they knew worked, but you never know.
Yeah, maybe some small variations.
Could be.
I just want a couple pictures, which I didn't do this before. So that's the book we've seen. That's the inside, and I'm stealing these pictures directly from your book. So hopefully you don't
That's
mind.
fine. No, that's okay.
They look pretty good. And then the contents, and if you look, we're doing from Rippey to Russell, and we're going halfway through there today. And this was a bridge. And I just wanted to get this bridge because you talked about that bridge during our tasting.
Yeah, people bungee jump off that bridge. Now that's not the rail bridge. That's a bridge near it, but that bridge is like a walking bridge, and people bungee jump off that right above the Kentucky River there.
Perfect. Well, and we have a picture of, three pictures. So there's the Kentucky River, there's the distillery, and then we can zoom out a little bit. There's my highlighter showing people where you are, right between Louisville and Lexington. And then here's our bigger one. So we could see where you are in relationship to, North Carolina, which is home for you.
South Carolina. I'm actually South Carolina.
South Carolina, sorry.
On the border of Georgia, yeah.
Okay, SC, not NC. Done. All right, so let's get that off and let's go back to normal. And another question. So you described a rich, and I'm a history guy, so I find it really interesting history of how the Rippey family progressed in their business. So from James P. owning the small general store to T.B. Rippey taking the reins and building because he did. He pushed.
He flipped. He did a lot of flipping. So he would invest in a distillery, kind of upgrade it, and then sell it off, and then repeat the process. He really only held on to two distilleries long term, Cliff Springs and Clover Bottom. Those were kind of his babies. One of them was the one that his father basically had for about a year and passed on to him. And then you had one that he built himself. But Cliff Springs and Clover Bottoms were his two biggies. But he had a lot of other ones around Anderson County and outside of Anderson County that he owned for short periods of time. And he would also enter into ventures with other distillers and partner up with them temporarily and, trade in and out. So he did very, very well alternatively. Like, I guess there was a quote in the book from his great-great-grandson that basically said that, he was well off and broke at the same time. Like he would have a lot of money and then he would have no money. And a lot of these entrepreneurs are still like that now, but back then that wasn't uncommon, just like it's not uncommon today. But the end of his dynasty, happened rather quickly, and there was a lot of mystery around that I had to dig in and try to figure out. Why did he go from this big presence and dynasty to all of a sudden, selling out essentially, and that there was a lot of time put into that research.
And you explain that in the book. I don't know if we want to say it. I think people should actually buy the book and find out themselves where he was to.
Yeah, there's a lot of distilleries at the end of the 19th century there were selling out to the Whiskey Trust, and there was a lot of assumptions there about that weren't 100% right. So I learned that as I was researching the book.
All right. And I have a question later about the Whiskey Trust too. So we'll keep going.
Okay.
So going from father James C. to James P., the eldest son, to TB, the youngest son, they never bottled for themselves, and they sold exclusively to wholesalers. Now, us Scotch people, we have a hard time with this concept where you're making something, but you're not bottling it. Can you explain why they never bottled for themselves? Was it a cost opportunity?
I believe they did bottle for themselves eventually. But a lot of the bourbon producers, I know for a fact that James P. Rippey and T.B. Rippey bottled for themselves some of their whiskey, but a lot of the whiskey that the producers were making in the late 19th century was wholesale. There were what they call rectifiers, and there were non-distiller producers, what we call them now, but these were basically companies that were bottling whiskey, slapping their own label on it, purchasing it in bulk from anywhere they could get it in Kentucky, and there were a lot of these. it's not. This still happens now. I mean, we still have non-distiller producers doing this now, but back then, like, see, nowadays there's kind of like this. People get kind of like, I don't know what's the right word here. They think there's some shady activity with it. Like it's looked at as not so. Like, I don't know. Back then that was just common. I mean, it was not. Wholesaling your whiskey was that's kind of what everybody did.
All right. So it wasn't a money issue. They could have bottled if they wanted to. They had the money. They had the opportunity. They just decided not to. All right.
Yep.
Well, it's kind of like the East Coast golf, where they everybody makes their whiskey and then the province actually bottles for them.
Yeah, and we heard about that way back when as well in Scotland, in Ireland. They were doing the same thing. And people would make tea. People would have blend their own tea, blend their own whiskeys and stuff like that. It's just when we think of a predominant family, maybe then they weren't so predominant. Maybe it's so iconic now. Maybe it wasn't so iconic then. And I'm trying to think of the book tells us when it kind of transfers over. Mm-hmm. But I still would have liked, and you said there's kind of a mystique to thinking that you're going to find this old bottle that would have been produced by the old Rippies. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. When you get into when Shinley owned the Rippy name, and I think this may have been kind of what you're talking about in the 40s, the 1940s, the Rippies were producing whiskey for Shinley. And there was a contract there where the Rippies could only produce 1,000 barrels for themselves. All the other barrels had to go to Shinley. And Shinley owned the Rippy brand names. They owned Old Rippy, and they owned, there was another one, a Rippy brand. But they owned these brands, and so the Rippies couldn't use them. Whether or not Shinley put Rippy's whiskey, into those bottles, it's hard to say, but we'd like to assume that. I mean, it's romantic to think that. But if you go back to like the 1800s, when T.B. Rippy was distilling and James P. Rippy were distilling, I know James Rippy had J.P. Rippy was one of his brands, and I would like to assume that he was bottling that, and T.B. Rippy was very likely bottling Old Rippy. But when he sold to the trust, then those names eventually got absorbed into like Shinley. So. That's a whole another conversation there. But yeah, I do think that there was some bottling of their own spirits early on, but later on in the 40s, you did not find Rippies bottling a Rippy whiskey themselves. That was all part of Shinley. All
right, good stuff. And I told you I had my favorite quote, so I do have a favorite quote.
Okay,
someone else has got them, so I'm going to read it to you. And here. There we go. So the first part of it's there. While I'm unable to determine TB's formal stance at the time of the war, there was apparently no bad blood between Rippy, James P. Rippy, who fought for the Confederacy, and Searcy, a Union captain, by 1886. At least wounds had healed, and I'd like to think bourbon had something to do with that. I like to think that alcohol had something to do with it. So there are things more important than grudges in this world. So David and the panel, do you have a favorite memorable quote? So, David, do you have one in there that you worked on a lot and were really proud of?
I don't have one that I necessarily worked on a lot. I do have one that I like about Jimmy. Okay. But just going back to the quote that and I'll mention that in a second. But going back to the quote that you stated there, I did find it very interesting that Kentucky was split in the Civil War. And so you had, a good half of the state that was siding one way or the other. And, with Willie Searcy being, I believe he was a captain for the Union Army. And you had James P. in the Confederacy. After the war kind of heal these wounds. I mean, I was told by T.B. Rippy IV that they were good friends, that they were like best friends, that James P. Rippy and Willie Searcy, like, not only did they get along, they were buddies. And I think that happened a lot in the country when the Civil War was over. There was a bond there, a bond in blood, essentially. And the country had a lot of wounds to heal. Whether bourbon had something to do with that or not, I mean, like I said, I'd like to think so. They were both in the same field there. So maybe so, but they were good friends. But as far as a quote that is a favorite of mine,
Yep.
there is one about Jimmy, if I can find it. Here it is. So this is jumping ahead here. So this is jumping to Jimmy Russell, okay. Who's the master distiller of Wild Turkey.
And he's next week for us, but that's good. Keep it up.
Yeah, and so this is referring to the time when he had been hired there at the distillery, which was operating as Anderson County at the time he was hired, and it became JTS Brown and eventually Wild Turkey. But he worked under someone named Bill Hughes. Bill Hughes was a master distiller there, and he had distilled before Prohibition, and he was teaching Jimmy how to do things. And so the quote is, "It's unknown exactly what Bill Hughes saw in young Jimmy Russell, but I'd wager it was the same thing we see in Jimmy today, a charming yet humble personality with firm dedication and a willingness to see a job done right. Attitude. Many folks work, fewer folks work hard, and even fewer work hard with an unwavering positive attitude." And that's Jimmy Russell. He says he's never worked a day in his life, and that's because he loves what he does.
And you've met him, you've talked, you've had conversations, so it's nice. And you're paying homage to him. That's fantastic. I like that. So I liked, although we'll talk about it next week, I like just following that part where he wasn't sure if they were going to fire him because he was changing jobs every 2 weeks. He figured out how to do one thing, and as soon as he figured it out, he was moved to another job. So he was he figured out eventually, or maybe it was his wife that told him that he was being groomed for leadership there at one point. But I like the thought that I'm doing this job as hard as I can. I know it. What do you mean you want me to do something else?
Yeah, he was sent from one thing to the next, and back then, usually once you were hired, they found something for you to do, and you either did good or you were gone. Yeah. And so his worry was that he wasn't doing anything right.
Yeah. No, it's good. How about a quote from someone else? Anyone got a quote? A favorite one out there?
Unfortunately, you kind of stole my quote, as you usually do.
You always say that. I don't think you ever come up with a quote and you say it to me.
So this one actually relates very personal to me because I have a very good friend down in Kentucky, Indiana area. And even in her own family, because of the division way back then, like her son is just a hick. He's got that whole twang going on and stuff like that. But, the family itself has got, they got two different dialects of speech, even though it's the same family. And it's just because there is a division down there.
Okay.
Yeah, it just brings it right back to this quote.
Well, I thought it was really weird that someone in the same county, they could be neighbors, they could be brothers, being on different sides of that war. So we have no idea. We can't picture that where we are. We've never had that, right? But it kind of opens your eyes a little bit. Dave, John, do you have one?
I'm out. Well, I do, but I can't remember one of the guys' names in the thing.
Okay.
So
yeah, it's hard to follow. And I actually had to, on my little whiteboard, sorry, I'm a teacher. On my little whiteboard at one point, I had the family tree actually, and the branches off with the or JP and his sons and things. So I needed the visual for it myself. Well,
this is the first time I've ever done the book on my tablet, and I don't like it. I want to have that book where I could put a note in the column and this piece of paper sticking out, because I know you're going to ask me a question, so I need to be able to reference that thing. So yeah,
I'm a teacher, and I don't think I ever outlived the role, even with people who I would have never taught at any point in time. That's good. John, you're the same one. You don't like reading off your tablet either, but did you find a quote in there somewhere?
Yeah. Well, once I get the book, then I'll read it. I just can't read on the computer screen. It just drives my eyes buggy. So I can't wait to get the book, and then I'll dive right into it.
We still got more stuff to talk about. We're good and good. Supplementary question, though, for David. Is it safe to say that the brothers were partners, but TB was the driving force in them? Or was it his personality that just kind of pushed the brother out?
Well, if you're talking about TB and James, I don't think they were ever partners.
Okay.
No, they had their own thing going. And as far as my research shows that, as a matter of fact, James P. Rippey worked for Bond and Lillard for a time because his wife was the sister of Christopher C. Lillard, and so James worked for Bond and Lillard, and then he started his own distillery later. I think it was around 1891, and that was kind of the end of TB's kind of dynasty there. So TB, he had his own little thing going. Never owned a distillery there at Wild Turkey. His, where Wild Turkey is now. He was in that Anderson County area. James P. Rippey, when he invested in the Old Moore Distillery around 1891 or so, that's the location where Wild Turkey is now. And he sold that to T.B. Rippey's sons, which, of course, that's why it was named Rippey Brothers. But there was never a partnership there, to my knowledge.
I thought there was. That's all right. I'm getting my information from you. It's just me misreading it. Says the teacher. I'm not like it.
Yeah, I don't think they were ever partners.
Well, I'll trust you, man. You know everything about this. You're teaching me.
I don't know everything. It's you learn every day. You find out new things. So
no, I agree. And David, this might be because I'm Canadian and probably more of a socialist ideal. And Kent rolls his eyes when I say I'm kind of socialist sometimes. That I'm more socialist than your average American. Let's say that. But can you tell our viewers what the Whiskey Trust is, like its major role, and why people like it or disliked it or thought it was great, and why it may have been bad for the Rippies, even though it might be a good thing? Or I need kind of the outlook for
okay. Well, trust in this sense, they're the way that these operated they're not legal now. There was an act around 1890 or so that kind of busted these up, and then later on I believe it was Woodrow Wilson's presidency that they put the final nail in that coffin and made sure these trusts didn't happen again. But essentially, it was a bad thing for consumers because what you would essentially have is like an association. We call it a trust, but it's like an association of businesses. They all get together. They're in the same field, okay, and they control the price. So they all agree that the price of a certain product is going to be a maximum dollar amount, and they're all going to charge that same amount. So in whiskey, I would imagine it was a price per gallon or something. And so you basically make it where you destroy competition. And as more and more distilleries join this trust, it gets stronger and stronger. And it becomes almost impossible for distilleries outside of this trust to compete because they're getting the best prices on the grains and the resources they need to make the product. And so what would happen is if anyone did kind of stand up to the trust, there were bully tactics that would happen. So they would try to force them into the trust. T.B. Rippey did eventually sell to the Whiskey Trust, and there was a lot of speculation as to why he did that. And sometimes it involved, when people did this, like I said, it could involve bully tactics. It could involve just them wanting to get out and cash out. But that's what a trust is. It's basically a way to kind of fix the market through joining together. You cannot do that now anymore legally.
Okay.
That sounds like our telecommunications in Canada.
Could be.
Yeah. I'm going to go to farming, though. I need someone on my panel that knows more about farming than me. Tell me about the co-ops we have and the supply management. And I think there's cost setting as well with our farmers throughout Canada. Can anyone explain it or try to make the comparison between that and the Whiskey Trust? Is it the same thing?
Well, that's like the Alberta wheat farm. All the farmers dumped their grain into one common source and were paid equally for their grain instead of having every farm go out and have to fight for their own value on their grain. And unfortunately,
with cattle, or they do it with
dumped that a few years back. So.
But they're still doing it now with cattle, and they're still doing it with not milk, whatever products.
Milk is regulated as well.
So dairy products. So it's the same idea, though. as the Whiskey Trust, is it not? So something that we still do that they don't?
Yeah, but it's provincially governed. It's not a private entity.
Okay. How about through the States? Is there anything like that in the States? Through farmers, and I'm thinking
Well, look at the hop union. All those hop farmers sell to the hop union. They all belong to it.
Tell me about that, Dave. Where you buy in the States,
it's just,
you have to go through a hop union?
Well, it's called hop union, and a lot of the hop farmers sell it. All their product goes into the hop union, and then you buy. When I say you, I mean when the brewers buy, they buy through hop union.
Okay, and they're setting the price then, so they're a monopoly essentially that you have to go through.
It looks that way to me, but I can't be sure. I know that I talked to a guy in Oregon, and his entire production went to Anheuser-Busch.
Oh,
like he didn't have to worry about anything. They bought it all. But yeah, look it up. Hop Union.
I will look that up. I love the name, the Hop Union.
Yeah.
A bunch of thugs with the whole hops going on and going in the background.
Well, that's exactly what the Whiskey Trust sounded like. That some guys would show up, and either you're in the trust or you get out of town.
Burned down somehow. Okay, I'd like to see a movie about that at one point, to tell you the truth. So, David, I think you should be writing a screenplay for something like that, the Whiskey Trust, and the gunslingers, or I don't know. I think it's a good story. I like a bully story.
Yeah, it's not really a topic that interests me too much. I'm not really an expert in that area, but I'm sure Michael Veach or Chuck Cowdery could probably explain it a hell of a lot better than I could. I know that the Whiskey Trust is just a informal name. It was a cattle feeders and something. It had a long name. It wasn't just whiskey. It involved the products or the resources surrounding whiskey, specifically farming, to get the grains. But yeah, I know there's all types of unions and trade associations and things that do this type of thing where they try to, get the prices, where they fix it. I'm wondering, what the key differences are. In the end, I think does it hurt the consumer? So I got a feeling that at least in the United States, and again, this is not my area of expertise, but I'm thinking that if it starts tinkering with an open market and affecting the consumer price, then that's when they come in and say, you can't do this. This is a trust.
Right.
As far as businesses, competing with one another, but not really affecting the consumer. I don't know, how that is judged.
All right. No, I just wanted kind of an outlook on it, and that's what you've given. It's perfect, but I still want to see a movie on it with these. And I want to see the Hop Union movie kind of bonding with them. Anyways, I'll go on. So T.D. Rippey's got 4 sons. He had Ernest, Ezra, Forrest, and Robert. And they opened their own distillery, the Rippey Brothers Distillery, in 1905. But the Volstead Act, Prohibition, pauses that. They reopened in 1933, so you say you're right. And Ernest becomes the distillery's master distiller. I didn't want to, I'm not questioning that. But they're still a wholesaler, and they sell to Schenley. So David, because of our time with Davin Nicole and your book, we know that Schenley was one of the companies that were able to sell medicinal whiskey.
That's right.
Is there any chance that the Rippeys made bourbon for Schenley at this time? So post or during Prohibition, not just after, because you talked about after.
No, it was shut down during Prohibition. The distillery was completely just closed down. So when they opened it back up, they actually had to get it back into running shape again. And they entered into the contract with Schenley because Schenley, needed whiskey, and that's what you did. You sold to whoever needed whiskey. Wholesaling was not an uncommon thing back then. Schenley just happened to own those Rippey brands. So, we like to think that the Rippey whiskey went into the Rippey brands. We don't know that. But, they did not produce any whiskey during Prohibition. They did not. You had to have a medicinal license. Yeah, and they did not
Schenley
have that.
had it, and they were furnishing Schenley. But if it was that's good.
I guess Schenley would have had to purchase the distillery in order for that license to apply. Right. That's just. But I'm not an expert in that area. But it was closed during Prohibition.
You're allowed to speculate. I'll believe whatever you say anyway. one more thing. Let's go on. And I don't want to quote you again because I do too many quotes. I know I do. It's the teacher in me. But I need you to tell me about the story of A Brand Was Born. And I could give you the quote if you want me to, but and the last part of it is the following year when the same group of sportsmen gathered again, they requested McCarthy bring along that wild turkey bourbon, and thus A Brand Was Born. So if you could tell us that, I know you've said a lot, David.
Oh no, it's
but I want it to be on this show. I want people to
okay. So Wild Turkey, it was never originally a distillery. Wild Turkey was a brand, and that's how it started. It was exclusively a brand. So Austin Nichols and Company, at one point in time, was the largest grocery wholesaler in the world. When the five and dime started becoming popular, they saw the writing on the wall and diversified into wine and spirits. After Prohibition, they went exclusively into wine and spirits, and no longer were a grocery wholesaler. And they had a bourbon called Austin Nichols Bourbon. They also had a rye as well. And they would just, it was sourced. So they would go out and get wholesale agreements there to get barrels from wherever they could get them to make their bourbon. And in there was a hunting trip sometime in the late 1930s, 38, 39, somewhere around there, where an executive named Thomas McCarthy had taken some bourbon with him. It was 101 proof bourbon that he had taken along with him on this hunting trip. And it was a hit. Him and his buddies loved it, and his buddies wanted more of it. And when they said, bring along some of that bourbon from the Wild Turkey trip, it just kind of a light bulb went off in his head, and he decided this is going to be a great name for a bourbon brand. And so in 1942, Wild Turkey bourbon hit shelves. It was 101 proof and 8 years in age, very similar to the bourbon that he took along with him on that hunting trip. And, some people think that, when it comes to whiskey, a lot of these stories are kind of fabricated, but Jimmy tells this story, and he said that, Mr. McCarthy told it to him, and it's a true story. And I believe Jimmy. So, it's one of these legends, but I think it really is grounded in truth that there was a hunting trip and the bourbon went along and light bulb moment there. And so that's why you have Wild Turkey.
No, so do we know what they were hunting for?
They were hunting wild turkeys.
Okay.
So they were hunting wild turkeys in South Carolina, where I'm at, and they, they said, bring along that Wild Turkey bourbon, as in, the bourbon that you had taken with you on the last trip we were on.
Yeah.
David, have you ever gone on a turkey hunt?
I have not.
Oh, sorry, wrong day.
No, it's okay. I'm not a big sportsman. I have nothing against folks that are, but no, I've never gone on a turkey hunt myself. A lot of my friends have, but I have not.
Well, I'm just thinking, just to be more compatible with what you're doing, just to say you've gone through the experiment.
I guess I kind of have to now. I mean, I'm just a few miles away from the National Wild Turkey Federation in Edgefield, South Carolina. So I probably should.
You don't have to shoot. You could just go out with a friend and just stay beside them or behind them, and
stay behind.
I can bring the wild turkey on the Wild Turkey.
Done. And I would bring you for that reason. And there's a wild turkey kind of thing that you could actually do to be part of it as well.
So, David, if you go out turkey hunting, stay on his left side, not on the right side.
Okay.
Well, yeah, right.
So you don't get hit, huh?
Hot shells.
Yep.
Oh, the shells. Okay. See, I didn't know this. I have no idea. Dave, you were going to say something. Have you ever been on a turkey shoot?
No, I was staying at a cabin in Montana, and I'm looking out on the deck there, thinking, "What the hell's that?" And the guys I'm with go, "Well, those are turkeys." I said, "Geez, I never seen those things before." It was the oddest thing. See them running them across the front lawn.
Are they fast, Dave?
I didn't time them, but they were just out there playing around. Yeah.
Did you time them?
They looked pretty big.
Okay.
I wasn't going anywhere near them.
I think this is a great time after this to try our three whiskeys. So you said in the book, 1950s, they already had the rye and they had the 101s. So we did our bourbon tasting with you 2 weeks ago, so now it's rye time. So let's all try the Wild Turkey Rye. Those of us that have it and haven't drank it already, or
This is the newer label. Same thing, newer label.
Do you like
There's no
that?
reading ahead.
And those are the little bottles that I gave them. That's good. And I'm doing the side with the Russells just to see which one I like better, and then I'm going to do the better, whichever one of those I like better. Go to the stock and barrel. But I find the Wild Turkey Rye. I don't get very much on the nose. Anyone else?
No. I had to check the alcohol, the ABV, just to make sure I was getting this right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 81 rye is very much a mixer rye. It's not necessarily what you would buy to sip and eat. I mean, you can. There's nothing wrong with it. It just it's for cocktails, essentially.
But I think it's a
Go, Dave.
Yeah. I would give it to somebody that was new and say, here, try this rye. It's very easy to drink.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Our ryes are, because we have 100% rye in many of our ryes here in Alberta is rye country, and we love our ryes. And when I taste something that's on made for mixing, it's usually a high rye count to it. And this, I don't get that. I know it's 13% because that's everything else they do. But yeah, I'm not getting a whole bunch on the nose.
Well, no, the Wild Turkey, the rye content in Wild Turkey Rye is 52%.
Oh,
and,
sorry.
Oh, this is 52? Wow.
Sorry. I was thinking about the mash bill for the bourbon.
Yeah. It has to, in the United States, to be a rye, it has to be at least 51%.
So is that
straight rye? Right. Yeah.
straight rye? Yeah.
Yeah. Good. And Kent, Cheryl, John, what do you think of the Wild Turkey Rye?
It's nice. Very easy to drink. Nice flavor.
I find it like water.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, it's a little bit dangerous. When
Nothing offensive. It's not overly youthful, or it's just not very complex. And like I said, it's a good mixer whiskey.
Maybe if I had the 101, I'd appreciate it a little bit more. Just
101 rye is a good bit more complex than the 81.
All right.
So this is rye?
No, that's the 101 bourbon. So I'm talking about they have a 101 rye. So it's a straight rye at 101 proof.
Okay.
Which I'm
starting to catch on now.
Okay.
It's all good. And the Russells.
This is the Russell 6. I have the older label open.
Oh.
But you've got the newer label, Dolph.
So keep that on the screen so people can see both. I like that one. Why did they go to this?
They Campari changes labels all the time. I don't know.
Yours is a good looking bottle. Can I see that again?
Yeah. I believe Robin helped
Yeah.
design this, I believe.
Okay. Robin Cooper for Campari.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I believe. I'm pretty sure he had a hand in it.
He'll say yes anyways. We're doing a tasting with them in November 27th, I think. That'll be a Scotch tasting doing with them. So I talked to him a little bit. He was on, for those that are out there didn't know this, he was on with David and us in the Alberta Scotch Society for our tasting. What do we think of the Russells, guys?
It's got a little more heat to it, but it's got a little more ABV.
I'm getting cigar.
Yeah, we both like this better. Yeah, like quite a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Considerably. But so tobacco is what I get on it for some reason. I didn't expect tobacco. Anyone else with that, or am I alone?
Well, the 6-year, obviously it has a 6-year age statement. The 81 is more like I would say a 4 to 5, maybe 6 year, but mostly a 4-year rye. The 6-year, of course, being 6 years, you're going to have that maturity there. And that just means that the youngest whiskey in the batch is 6 years. So it could have some older whiskey in it as well. 90 proof. So, you're getting, 9 more points of proof there. And it just has more complexity.
Yeah.
So where do they fall in price comparison?
Canadian for us. So Wild Turkey Rye, $25. The Russell 6-year-old's $40, and the stock and barrel that we're going to have is $80.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Well, you're going to have. I don't have any.
American. What are they, Dave? For Wild Turkey Rye, American.
Okay, so the 81 rye you can usually find at $20 to $25.
Okay.
The 6-year-old rye is usually $30 to $40. The 101 rye is usually $30, $35, but it's sold in liters only right now. So you get more volume. And then you have the Russell's Reserve single barrel rye.
Yeah.
Okay, which is 104 proof, single barrel, non-chill filtered. And that's usually about $65.
That'd be
American.
nice to get my hands on that guy.
This is probably Wild Turkey's best rye. Some people will say the rare breed rye, and depending on my mood, I might agree with them. But to me, this is the best that they've got outside of Cornerstone.
Okay. Well, I love my rye, and the people on here know that. I'm the Alberta Scotch Society, but rye is
your jam, huh?
I love the spice. I really. But this is lovely. I like Russell's. It's good. And those of us with the stock and barrel. So, David, do you still have the stock and barrel?
I do. I've got it poured, and it's notably lighter in color than.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so, if I put this up, this is a single cask strength, 100% rye from stock and barrel. And does anyone remember why Davin and Blair from our last book liked this one so much? Or
Hey, Joe,
this distillery? Yep.
your stock and barrel. What was the percentage on it?
Mine is 60.2.
Oh, mine is 46.
Oh, ooh. Well, you should
They're
have
side.
buddy, you got mine. No.
Yeah,
this
they're
is
side by side in the store, and they're hard to tell apart.
Yeah. This is the single barrel, and we wanted the single barrel because
anyways.
well, it's what I like. You know that.
Yep.
We like our cask strength stuff up here. And so, what do you think, Dave?
Well, I think I dabbled in that Alberta Premium that you sent me. I think I like the Alberta Premium better than this.
Yeah.
That's just.
Me too.
Yep.
There's a lot of lemon here.
It's a very odd rye.
It's like a lemon polish, like a furniture polish kind of lemon. I mean, and I'm not, saying that in a bad. That's what I'm like. A lemon oil is what I'm getting out of it.
I like the smell of Pledge. That brings up great memories for me. Yep. But it's unique, and Davin loves these guys. They're the first ones to really stick into rye. They had a hard time making the rye at first too. They tell the story about Dave. Were you on with me with them?
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. They left it in. They left it in the tank overnight. When they came in, there was whiskey all over the shop because they didn't understand how much it was going to foam, and she blew up.
And Dave, as well, they're distillers, but they made beer before, and they knew that, or what they do to stop that from happening is they put rice husks so that
no. That's the rice hulls are put there so it doesn't clump up and cause. Basically, it turns into a concrete or a mess in the bottom, and that was what happened to the guys down in Turner Valley, Eau Claire.
Yeah,
it plugged up a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a problem with plugging, and then you got a problem with foam. So,
and theirs was foam then.
Theirs was foam, and that's why they split it into two equal amounts into two stills because it couldn't handle it.
All right. So, do we have a favorite of the night, ladies and gentlemen?
Russell's.
I'm saying that too. The Russell 6.
Yeah, the Russell 6 is, and what's interesting is that the Russell 6 is probably the rye, the Wild Turkey rye I buy the least. I buy the single barrel rye very frequently. I buy the 101 rye frequently. The rare breed rye I've bought a good bit. It just came out, but I'm plowing through those.
Well, you say in your book that it kind of fills a niche that you don't buy so often. It's not the blend, and it's not really the sipping ryes that you would go to. So it's kind of a middle niche that.
Yeah, it's so 101 rye has this kick. It's a little bit more youthful than the 6-year, but it has a nice kick to it. and really stands out in a cocktail or neat. It's perfectly fine either way. The 6 is just great for a nice sipping whiskey, but it doesn't really have a lot of kick to it. It's a very easygoing, flavorful rye whiskey. The single barrel rye, this is where it's at right here. This has it has the best of everything. It's a nice, complex sipper, but it has a kick in a way that's not youthful or vibrant, but more a kick in a way that's a longer, spicier finish, more complexity, more layers there. Barrel depending, of course.
I think you get that with the oils that they strip out. So if they didn't strip out the oils or chill filter the Russell 6, I think it would have a little bit more to it.
Yeah, I wish the chill filtering would just be cut altogether. I hate, I mean, I understand you would have to have it with the 81 proof, but you really don't.
It's cloudy. I really don't care. Just like my beer, I can have cloudy beer and still be really happy. My big thing is mouthfeel. I love the mouthfeel, and I judge things by that before taste even, because that's the first thing I do. It's the mouthfeel, and then I go for the taste.
So can I ask a question?
Absolutely, buddy.
David, it says single barrel on there. Are you telling me that they just take one barrel and make 350 bottles or something?
You'll usually get it depends on the proof, but for like a Russell's Reserve single barrel bourbon, you usually get anywhere from 100 to 180 bottles. With the single barrel rye, I would imagine that you're getting a little bit more out of it. I would say you probably get about 100. It's at 104 proof, so I'd say 140 to 180 bottles, maybe a little bit more because it's about 6 to 8 years, but I wouldn't say any more than 200 bottles a barrel of the Russell's Reserve single barrel rye.
So they are putting out this thing. They get 140 bottles. How do we get so lucky to get one?
Well, they use a lot of barrels, so it's a single barrel expression.
Single barrel. So each barrel is different. So if you took 3 different bottles out of that single barrel thing, they could be totally different.
Right. So
because
the
barrels are going to be different.
Right. That is one of the beautiful things about Wild Turkey, more specifically with their bourbon than their rye, is that their single barrel expressions have such great variance to them. So they could have 1,000 barrels. It's just one barrel's bottled at a time. Right. That's right. Right.
I'm a little slow. It takes me a while to figure this out.
It's okay. And what's interesting about it is that you go to the store, for example, and you buy a bottle, and if it's a bottle that you buy regularly, you kind of know what you're going to get, And what's cool about having a single barrel expression is you don't really know what you're going to get. I mean, you have an idea and you think it's going to be a certain way. But sometimes you're like, oh my God, this is like pure bubble gum. What's up with this? And you'll land on this really unique barrel that it's almost like you got a little miniature, LE or something, like, it's like a limited edition in a way. And it is very much a limited edition. You're limited to a very finite number of bottles there.
So now
you never find it again either, but that's the mystique, and that's why we like it. We love our single barrels. Like my SMWS right here, it's all about the single barrels and finding. I know Kent doesn't do them anymore, but that's why I like it. I like having something where you have an idea, but it could be different. And the more whiskeys you drink, I think we're looking for something different. I think we're going for the different, because if you were happy with the same expression, I'd have. I don't want to tell you how many bottles back here, but just of 2 or 3 different tastes. And I don't. Dave will buy 3 or 4 of something that he loves, so he has all that. And I think that makes sense in many cases, but I'd rather just keep trying as many different ones as possible. But now they're not core expressions I'm buying. Mostly the independent bottlers, because they're independent, cast that they sold to them. So I like that.
Well, I mean, I think that was a great explanation, because I listen to guys talk all the time. They always talk about, this is a small batch. I'm the first guy to put it in my hand, and how small is the batch? And nobody ever knows the answer.
Yeah.
It's not legally defined. There's no legal definition in the United States as to what a small batch is exactly. It could be 2 barrels. It could be 500 barrels. You don't know. There's different people that feel like it's a certain amount, but yeah, you're right. Small batch is very
depending on your distillery. A small batch could be something very different from another.
Yeah,
one, right?
yeah. And that explanation was great because now I want to try a couple of different single barrels.
Yeah,
side by side to see if you can tell the difference. I agree. I love that.
Yeah, and a good one to go with on the bourbon side is exactly, what Kent's holding up there, the Kentucky Spirit, because the sad thing is with these Russell single barrels, they don't give you any rickhouse information. You don't really know. It's a blind guess. But with Kentucky Spirit, you get the rickhouse information, the rack information, the bottling date, and the floor, or well, let's see. It's got proof date, rack, and warehouse.
So then this would be fun to go through the stores and just check the label.
Yeah, check the label.
Yeah. My question to you, in our tasting, you were talking about warehouses. This is warehouse K. And I can't remember what you were saying about K.
To me, K is the wild card rickhouse. Yeah, I've had K barrels that were like super candy-esque and fruity, and I've had them where they're like very much like Four Roses with a lot of like red fruit and rye spice. I've had them where they're real heavy on the earthy tones, where you're getting like a lot of dark tobacco and leather. They run the gamut depending on the floor and the year. But K's always, I just, like a lot of the other rick houses, I kind of have a good idea of what it's going to taste like before tasting it, especially like A, B, G, some of these. But K, it just sky's the limit on that one.
And this one came out very spicy. Actually, this one I'm probably going to give to Dolph because he loves that heavy rye spice. And yeah, you're welcome.
After he drinks 2/3 of it. Yeah.
Here, Dolph.
It's too spicy for my palate.
All right.
Oh.
I got stuff for you here. You know what?
Yeah.
You know what? I really wanted this to be under an hour, and it's an hour and 10. And
hour and 10.
Hour and 10 minutes or
11.
11.
11, yeah.
But I still have one last question because I want this to be the Rippy show and then the Russell show being the next. So I've got one last question. And just tell everyone again, next week we're doing the Master's Keep Lot 40 cast strength, and we're doing the Alberta Premium cast strength. 3 better whiskeys. I think that's something to look forward to, I think, next week. And if any of you already drank yours, I think you're out of luck because our bottle share, I gave everyone the bottle shares. I have nothing left. So.
I got 2 of the 3.
All right, good. But I have Alberta Premium, and I do have the cast strength. I just have no more Masters Keep, the cornerstone.
I've got I need the other rye. Yeah.
The end of our night, the focus shifts primarily from Rippy to Russell next week. As a final comment, can you describe the point where Austin, Nichols, and company cemented the relationship with Wild Turkey, and why this is so important and prominent in your book? Because you spent some time describing this. Why is it so important that they're linked to them?
Okay. Well, Austin Nichols was looking for a steady supply there. I mean, if you're having to go around and buy barrels on the market for your product, what happens when those prices go crazy, or what happens when production starts slowing? You're going to be, having a hard time finding barrels to make your whiskey. So when they purchased the distillery in 1971, it was basically, they could now have control of not just barrels, but they have control of the source itself. The Rippy Brothers Distillery was purchased by the Gould brothers and became in the late 40s and became Anderson County Distilling Company in 1950. And then it became JTS Brown and Sons in 1955. And it operated as JTS Brown and Sons all the way up until 71, when Austin Nichols purchased the distillery, and it became the Austin Nichols Distillery. And from that point in time forward, Wild Turkey Bourbon has been produced at that distillery. And Jimmy Russell was the master distiller at the time they purchased the distillery there. So it's important in the sense that, Austin Nichols cemented the source for their whiskey. including their rye, because the rye was sourced from Maryland and Pennsylvania and Illinois all the way up until the mid to late 70s or so, because Jimmy started distilling rye himself, and that came of age, late 70s or so, early 80s, and they were able to phase out the sourcing of the rye. So there was no more whiskey coming from anywhere else but the distillery there in Lawrenceburg. But none of that would have happened had it not been for Austin Nichols purchasing that distillery. It probably would have just been, the same old operation they had been until maybe someone else purchased them.
Yeah, eventually sold out to something else, but now because of that, Wild Turkey survived.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Right.
Thank you very much, answer. I love it. Well, that's all the time we have, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a fantastic evening. Thanks to our listeners. Thanks to our panel. Dave, John, Kent, Cheryl, David, it's absolute pleasure spending this time with you. There's very few things I could think of that would be better to do on a Saturday night than spending time with you guys like we are right now. I love it. So, as always, guys, let's hold up a glass. I'll find one that's has a little bit in it. Here's to good company. Here's to good whiskey. Here's to good books. Here's to good conversation. And here's to seeing you all next week, Saturday, October 17th, for our Whisky Book Club's 4th book and the second and final episode of The American Spirit with author David Jennings, right over here. That's the guy there. As a final note, if you don't want to miss a minute of future episodes, subscribe button. And before we go, I just want to say a special thank you to John for joining us for the first time, Cheryl for being on camera for the first time. She's always just a little bit out, but she's there today. So very special thank you to you two for joining us. Thanks so much. And everybody have a fantastic, fantastic night. Thank you very much, David.